On to the Indiana Pacers, who were eliminated, Wes, in 4 games. They did not win that game 4 against Boston, but also very competitive, very entertaining series. And I think a team that has to feel good, even if we can all agree there was an element of luck in their run. They have Pascal Siakam, who they traded for with full intention, and all indications have been from even the teams bowing out of the sweepstakes to get him at the deadline to the comments from his agent after the acquisition that he will be returning. I think it's just a matter of how much, and if Indiana will give a max. If they will, then I think this might be over. From there, I honestly want to start kind of with the question of what do you feel like, having watched them for this whole playoffs, and honestly, quite a bit of with Haliburton and Siakam because they traded for Pascal so early. What do you think they need? What if you were to just say a type of player or a quality in a player that you would be putting at the top of your whiteboard in that front office if you could have your dream acquisition this summer?
Yeah, so with the Pacers, building around Tyrese Haliburton is pretty interesting, and I've written about this before. But you have to treat Tyrese Haliburton like he's your star quarterback, and what does he like to do, and so what kind of receivers does he like? And he's one of these guys that just wants big targets who run the floor and defend, and that's it. That's all you need. And I wrote that before they went out and acquired Pascal Siakam, and Pascal Siakam fits that to a T. I think if you want to make comparisons, like if Haliburton is Steve Nash, and Siakam might be his Amari Stoudemire. And so when you're kind of building around those two, because you're going to max out Siakam, and all the reporting around it makes it sound like that's going to be a done deal, and we'll see Siakam back with the Pacers.
5 years, $245 million would be the contract. Yep.
Great, do it. He's a perfect fit. And after that, just surround those two guys with more players that are long shooting 3-and-D type guys who want to run the floor, want to play in that fast pace. I obviously be opportunistic. It sounds like they're going to be aggressive, just like they were aggressive for Siakam, but they're not going to be stupid either, right? They're not going to make a trade just to make a trade. I like a lot of these guys. Like Nembhard looks like he might be that third star next to these guys. Like he looks great.
And Turner, which frankly already kind of is. So I honestly hate when he gets left out of this. I thought he was awesome all playoffs, and he is another perfect fit here. So they might have 3 building blocks with a couple of young guys who could quickly step into that. Like this team's close, I feel like.
Neesmith looks good, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what a home run on that guy, and so they've got really interesting pieces. I just think that, and TJ McConnell, it sounds like he's going to come back. He's extension eligible. Do it. The guy's awesome. He's right there pushing the pace, all the leadership stuff. I like all of it.
That's one thing I want to jump in on, though, is based on how Nembhard played and the fact that you have Haliburton, does it make sense to keep all 3? Or could you maybe capitalize on what McConnell... I think the veteran aspect of it is important, so I'm glad you said that. But you could also make a case of like, well, TJ McConnell's been in the league quite a long time. At the end of the day, he probably will never be better than he was in this postseason. We have 2 guys at his position. How many minutes can he realistically get? Especially if my answer to the question of what they need is to get a little bigger. Maybe... I think they could get quite a bit for him in a trade, and I wouldn't hold back from exploring that just because he was so awesome so many times for them in the playoffs.
First of all, I think all of Indianapolis would riot if you traded TJ McConnell. So you might not even be allowed to from an ownership perspective. But fair. Your point, you could get something for him. But is it more valuable? Like, what if you got a first-round pick back for TJ McConnell? Like, what do you care?
Well, I think my goal would probably be
including him in a bigger deal.
Yeah, maybe it's him and Mathurin, who I think we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah.
And that just can accumulate more and more salary to get you closer to somebody that is already a vet making a difference that you can plug in like you did with Siakam if you're able to do that.
Nobody's saying TJ McConnell's untouchable, but I wouldn't be actively shopping him either. If there was a star that came available that made sense, then and it takes McConnell's salary to get there, then that's something that you got to do. But to me, Mathurin is the guy. Like there's room for all 3 of these guys with McConnell, Nembhard, and Haliburton, but I don't know that there is a place for Mathurin. To me, like Nembhard could play off the ball, he could play on the ball. McConnell is just such a selfless player who just is so savvy that he knows how to play in between all these guys, even when he's on the court with them. Mathurin just needs the ball. And the thing with him is he does want to run the floor, and he is a little bit more of a battering ram mentality that the rest of this roster doesn't really have. So I'm not just shopping Mathurin for anything, but I do wonder what his overall fit in the grand scheme of things is, and if you can sort of, pivot on that resource and sort of reallocate it some other way that does make sense, make him the centerpiece of some sort of other big deal that gets you something back. But again, I don't know that I'm making any major moves with this team, despite the fact that they're hungry to make moves. I think they're really good. And I think just internal development and a healthy Tyrese Haliburton and all this stuff could mean a lot. And by the way, don't give up on your resources that you have just to make a move this summer when maybe the next Siakam deal will be available at the deadline as opposed to in the offseason. Like there's room for patience here.
For sure. And I think it's a great sign that they were able to get Siakam and get his commitment so quickly. It just bodes well for the idea of, okay, yes, it's Indianapolis, but maybe Haliburton and the way we play is enough to get guys to actually want to be here. Not free agents, but they're not going to have cap space. So if we trade for somebody, they'll maybe want to stick around, and that allows you to be more flexible. But yeah, I guess to me, I'm of the same opinion. Don't jump into anything. Ben Shepherd had an inconsistent three-point shot in the regular season. Carlisle sticks with him. He starts the last 2 games of this past series when Haliburton had to miss it, and shot 38% from deep over the course of the postseason. That's huge. Jarris Walker is like one of the most freakish, versatile guys in the whole NBA. I love that they gave him time down the stretch of the regular season. I get that he wasn't ready maybe to just, play in the playoffs as a raw athletic guy. He's probably just going to foul like crazy and be lost on offense. So I get that, but he could really blossom as he continues to grow. So it's not a team they traded everything for Siakam and they got to just keep going. They can have some optimism that there's room for internal development here. Before we get to Mathurin, though, because I have some trade ideas there, they also have 3 second-round picks this year and the McConnell contract and everything else, so there's options.
They have like 8 second-round picks or something that they have available to trade between this year and that.
And one of them's 36 this year, so it's a decent pick, yeah.
That is a decent pick. If you're right, they do need size. They need defense. I mean, this team was 26 in defensive rating in the regular season. They weren't much better in the playoffs, even though everybody tried to make us think that they were when they were in the Eastern Conference Finals just to generate some interest in a series that ultimately ended up in a sweep. But whatever. They need to get way better defensively. Part of that is size. I think they need to get better rim protection. Miles Turner is a little bit of an empty calorie rim protector where there's a lot of blocks, but not as much as the team defense rim protection stuff. There's room to grow there. Even if it's not necessarily trading Miles Turner, I just think that there's room to grow in the front court. But
here's where I come in with the size side of thing, and if I'm like encapsulating my goal for them in one sentence, and part of why I threw out the Nembhard McConnell thing and why I would be pretty aggressive on trying to move Mathurin is, ideally for me, if I can get big enough and add a good enough player this offseason or at next deadline, that's fair point, to make Nesmith my starting 2 instead of my starting 3, now I feel really good. That kind of encapsulates it to me. And like maybe that's Jarris Walker. I'm not really sure he's a 3, to be honest. Ben Shepherd's probably not big enough. So there's a lot of, they don't have that wing, and Aaron Nesmith is 6'5". So
it's a good point.
As we saw with him trying to guard Brown or Tatum or some of these guys, even LeBron back in the NBA Cup game, he can't really do that. So I think in a perfect world, he's a 2. You get a 6'8" guy to be your 3. Siakam's your 4. They also need rebounding because Siakam's not a great rebounder. So get somebody bigger to fill that, and I think you feel a lot better about all this.
Would you consider, I know I just said I wouldn't trade T.J. McConnell, but would you trade T.J. McConnell to Brooklyn, who needs a point guard, for Dorian Finney-Smith? Is that something that that moves the needle? Because he gives you that wing defender, right?
In a heartbeat.
Consider it.
Yeah.
You would do it in a heartbeat. I would do it in a heartbeat.
I would do it in a heartbeat. I mean, here's the thing about McConnell. He wasn't really doing this until this season at all. And even more specifically, he wasn't really doing it until the second half of the season. when he played in that in-season tournament, the Vegas games, it was a surprise. He hadn't really been in the rotation. And now we feel like he's so valuable, so, core to what they are, but he wasn't. They didn't even think of him that way like 8 months ago. So if you could turn that into somebody who fits more of a position of need, especially given that Nembhard's even better now and actually I believe can continue to get better, whereas again, McConnell's like, in his 30s. That's kind of where I am. I also have one more question on the Siakam side of it. He's already 30. Is it a no-brainer to give him 5 years?
Yep.
Really? You think, is it game will age fine, or you just have to do it because you're the Pacers and you traded for him?
Both. I mean, I think Siakam's going to age up fine. He does not look like he's losing a step even a little bit, in terms of his athleticism. He's an awesome player. He's, a year removed from being All-NBA?
Never really had major injury, even though he's on the Nick Nurse minutes load. He's never really gotten hurt.
And wants to be there. You're the Pacers. Yeah. You don't get that luxury, man. Like, you have a 30-year-old that wants to be there who's All-NBA caliber and fits perfect with your superstar. Give him all the money and then more if you need to.
So a new contract for him starting at, I think it's like $42.5 million in year one on that max deal, puts them in the tax. And they're really not able to get out of it unless they were to just pretty much offload Mathurin and Jalen Smith and not retain Obi Toppin, a.k.a. getting worse, which they're not going to intentionally do. So that's the other consideration. That doesn't really matter as far as 4 years versus 5. If you're starting him at 42.5, you're in the tax. So just another thing to drop in there. Last free agency thing before we get into Mathurin trades. Obi Toppin. Keep him, don't keep him. He's big, but to me, he's kind of fake size. He doesn't really do big man things. So I know I'm saying stay big, get bigger, but I'm kind of okay getting rid of Toppin because I don't actually think he provides that stuff despite being 6'8", 6'9".
You're right. Yeah, I mean, chicken legs, dude. Like, the guys
high center of gravity.
All chest, no legs at the gym, man. Like, that's whatever, dude. Like, if it gets you in the dunk contest, I like Obi Toppin fine. I don't mean to rag on him, but there's not a whole lot of strength there. There's not a whole lot of oomph in his game other than playing above the rim. Yeah, that's okay. Let him walk. And if Jalen Smith, he might walk away from that player option. He might be looking for more of an opportunity. There's not going to be a ton there for him. Like, there might even be an option where he takes less on a mid-level exception, like the taxpayer MLE at $5 million, which would be $2 million less than he's making, but gets an opportunity to play somewhere and bets on himself. We see this all the time. That wouldn't be shocking. Yeah. So I think Jalen Smith can easily opt out and look for playing time somewhere else because he's not going to really get it in Indiana. And so if Toppin walks, if Jalen Smith walks, and if you do make some sort of trade that sends McConnell elsewhere or Mathurin elsewhere, and maybe you take back a little bit less money in those deals, then you could get back under the tax if you're motivated, if you're the Pacers, and whatever. I don't know how motivated they are. I'm not their owner, but that's just sort of a them problem. But
it sounds cheap to say that could be a goal, but I think it would just be in anticipation of you're going to be in it soon.
And avoiding and just sort of delaying the clock on the repeater. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't trade for Siakam and then say we can't pay the tax. You don't acquire Haliburton and go all in around him. I think testament to the Pacers.
But you could let Obi Toppin and Jalen Smith walk and be okay with it at the same time.
Exactly. And then say, okay, next year maybe we'll get another guy here that's a vet and we're going to pay this soon, but maybe let's not rush it. And I would get that. All right, before we get to Ben Mathurin trades and then to Zach Cohen to talk the number one pick in the NBA draft, I have a story for you that I've been dying to tell throughout this whole Pacers playoff run, and now they're out, and we're not going to talk about them for a while, so I have to tell it here. And it's the single most embarrassing reporting moment I've had covering the NBA, I think.
Okay.
Well, it's this one, or there was one time when we were doing Zoom interviews during the NBA Finals in 2021, still back in that age, where I asked Jay Crowder a question about stopping Giannis, and he thought I was asking him it in like a please talk up Giannis kind of way, and got like very, very animated with me over a Zoom, but that was less because it wasn't face-to-face.
I have a Zoom, embarrassing Zoom story I'll save for another show, but we could do embarrassing reporting stories as off-season topic.
Honestly. But this one's Neesmith related, so let's keep it in. So
yeah,
I covered the NBA draft pretty closely when the Suns sucked, and went to the combine once and all this sort of stuff, and would go to college games because the Pac-12 used to exist here, and good teams would come through and everything else. This was not a Pac-12 game. It was at a Jerry Colangelo honorary tournament thing that they would do in the Suns Arena downtown, where they would invite like the top college programs. So I got to see Robert Williams play DeAndre Ayton. I got to see Brandon Clark and Rui Hachimura at Gonzaga versus
Just
Grant
legends
Williams
up and down
at Tennessee. Yes, all this stuff. So this year was Vanderbilt, and that was when Jerry Stackhouse was coaching the program, and Aaron Nesmith came. So I wanted to do a little feature on Nesmith. I broke down some of his film, and I would take that opportunity of like, great, there's no coverage, there's no beat writers for a lot of these college teams. I can get like a good quote or two from a prospect about their game, their development, their this, their that, and that makes for a decent story because not a lot of people are covering it from a draft angle and everything else. Stackhouse is a pro-style coach, and Nesmith is kind of this prototypical wing, getting more on-ball opportunities as a sophomore. Great, all good stuff. I get Nesmith one-on-one outside the locker room post-game. They lost the game to, I believe it was Santa Clara, but I didn't really care. I'm trying to talk to him about his, your playmaking and what's Coach Stackhouse bringing out of you with the pro mentality coming from the G League and the Raptors and everything else, and let's just walk through your game. But I did not pay enough attention to the result of the game. I was a little too hyped up to ask him all those questions about his development, Wes, and I straddle up to him, and he's still in uniform, sweating, whatever, coming off the emotions of the game, and I congratulated Aaron Nesmith on winning the game, which he did not do. And I have never gotten a more blank stare and felt like I wanted to just run away and jump into some kind of hole or off of some kind of bridge, or I don't really know, than I did in that moment. And I've never forgotten that, clearly. I was like, you are a complete moron. Why did you just... I mean, it was like a random game. He didn't really care, but it was just like... Right. Get the basic details of what just happened correct if you're going to come talk to me.
Did you just show up here? Right,
yeah.
That's awful. Great. You should definitely bring that up. There is a non-0% chance that he remembers that as one of his weirdest reporter interactions.
I hope not. But like, what's funny is he didn't address it. He didn't say like we lost. He just kind of
right. Oh, he just was polite.
He just sort of was like, yeah, or just maybe
confused.
Didn't even respond at all, and I just kind of went into my question. But man, brutal. Glad he recovered from that experience and was able to make a difference.
It took him a while
in the NBA playoffs. It did.
It took him a change of scenery. He had to leave Boston, go to Indiana.
Maybe I scarred him so bad. It took him this post-hype breakout was all my fault. All right, so Aaron Nesmith aside, I think he'll be a starter next year. I don't think Ben Mathurin will be. So here's what I had. Wizards, Spurs, Bulls. Those were the only teams that really jumped to mind as like a clear-cut fit, but I think Mathurin makes sense for me for a lot of teams who might be in some kind of rebuilding situation as just a buy low option. So it wasn't super easy to say this team will absolutely be dying to get him, but if he's available and that becomes known, I think a lot of teams could feel like they could be the team to develop him. League average efficiency, but awful defender, doesn't really play make, needs to be developed. But what did you think? Where could he land? Where could the Pacers look to maybe use him to upgrade?
No, I think those are the right teams, and I think we've already landed on the right positions. If you can turn his potential as a scoring guard, probably a sixth man at the end of the day. And I think he's got there are times, man, when he's on the court and you're like, he might be the most athletic player out here. It's crazy what he can do in terms of, when he's in his bag and he's finishing. I am not even close to giving up on Benedict Mathurin. And it was a little bit of a down season for him, but he also got hurt at the end. And so, the guy.
Your point about him being such a downhill, physical, aggressive guy, that's his best quality, and that's the thing that's impossible to replicate. So you add a little spruce to the rest of it, and you're working with something.
There are teams that look for that, right? Like the Clippers are a team that is always sort of looking for that, and if Russell Westbrook leaves, maybe they go after a guy like Mathurin. punch up their pace a little bit more. It's something that a lot of teams, if they decide that they want to play fast, which every team at Media Day says they want to play faster, having a guy that plays fast all the time like Mathurin could be helpful in accomplishing that. So, and then, so if you can repurpose that for somebody who adds some size, adds some a little bit more positional versatility, I think that's probably what you're looking for if you're the Pacers.
The problem for me was I struggled to find a deal that achieves what I said was my goal for the Pacers and involves Mathurin. So maybe it's going to be, just like the way they built this roster, it might be more doing a lot of things, keeping a lot of balls in the air. The one I found, Wes, that I could kind of get behind, even though it's not fully fitting what we've discussed, is sort of just turning Ben Mathurin into a better Ben Mathurin. So I had TJ McConnell and him to the Spurs for Keldon Johnson as an option. It's just sort of, hey, we're ready to win. Let's get a bench scorer who we already know is efficient and can contribute and get rid of the young guy.
Doesn't play defense.
Exactly. Very similar players,
right
honestly.
Yeah. Look, I don't hate that. I also think that there's another version of this where you say, maybe we do want to keep Obi Toppin. Maybe we do want to keep Jalen Smith. Maybe we do want to give TJ McConnell a raise on an extension. The thing with Benedict Mathurin is he's still on his rookie contract. It's just hard to find, and this is, I'm sure, what you ran into, 1-for-1 matches for him for guys who are also on rookie contracts, basically. And if they're not on rookie contracts, they're kind of just like older, washed-up veterans who are making the same amount of money. You're not really finding a guy in his prime unless you're packaging a bunch of players together, which, again, you could. But you could just go, okay, let's trade Mathurin to this team into cap space, get a couple of draft picks back because we don't have a lot of them, and maybe that helps us make that trade either later this offseason or closer to the deadline or maybe next summer. Just get some assets back, kind of take this resource who's on a rookie scale contract, kick the can down the road, kind of reset the clock on this one asset. Maybe that's just something that you do. And then in the short term, maybe it helps you retain one of Toppin or Smith or somebody like that.
Yeah, I think the Thunder and Magic are two teams with space that could use him just as a upside bet. They're already winning. They're kind of already on their way, but maybe he's like their 8th man next year, and both of those teams could use a little more juice as far as creators go. But yeah, I think, it's a testament to how versatile they've already been. I think that they have so many options. They have a lot of things that could help them, but they already just made the conference finals, and all their best players outside of Siakam are young and Turner, I guess. So it's
Mathurin looked like a core
see what
piece
happens.
A year ago. He was getting, I think he got 6th man of the year votes as a rookie, right? And so this guy looked like every bit of the core piece, and he kind of got lapped by some of these other dudes, and that's a good thing. That's a good problem to have if you're the Pacers. I have one other trade for you that's not Mathurin related.
Yeah, give it to me.
Before we get off the Pacers. Who says no to a Miles Turner for Jarrett Allen swap?
I think the Pacers, I do think they want to play 5 out, so or as close to it as they can. Siakam doesn't fully live in that, but when he has the ball, everybody else he's the one in, So I don't know. I think they'll be hard pressed to get rid of Turner, and I think he'll look better as a defender if they're able to keep the ball in front of them and execute better and be bigger.
My thought process was that Allen gives them another big target who runs the floor. Turner got better as a floor runner as this season went on. I was actually really impressed with how he did that in the playoffs. I thought he was just rolling to the rim really hard, but Jarrett Allen's just more consistently doing that and is a bigger target kind of on the move than Turner is, who kind of likes to settle into a sweet spot and get the ball with his back towards the basket and kind of start making his moves, or more of like a pick and pop kind of guy in the half court. And then Jarrett Allen's just a flatly better rim protector than Miles Turner is, and I think he would actually improve the defense. Miles Turner would give Cleveland something that they've been looking for in terms of some offensive punch, a guy who could space the floor. You've got Evan Mobley back there to kind of anchor the defense behind Turner, gives them a little bit more
better
of a
fit with
versatile
Mobley.
look. Much better fit with Mobley. So I don't know. I thought it would be interesting. Turner's also one more year left on his contract, so it would be now would be the time to trade him if you weren't fully sold on him if you're the Pacers. But then again, I do agree with you. He's got great chemistry with Haliburton. Maybe they are sold on Turner.
Him and Obi Toppin are the exact opposite. Obi Toppin has a really high center of gravity. Turner is a really low center of gravity. If you just maybe morph them into one player, it'd be like an All-NBA guy, it feels like. But Yeah, I mean, again, they have a ton of options. It's a very cool team, a very impressive team building accomplishment here. And even again, as Chris and I talked about, as we've said here, even if it's not, they were a conference finals team in the most historical, real sense of that achievement. They're on their way, and they easily could be back next year, and then that might even be more for real. So